welcome to Sectors Up Close. I'm Elena Casas. Our sector today is renewable energy, and our expert on the sector is Ross Gerber, president of Gerber Kawasaki. Investors have stormed into alternative energy ahead of the start of Joe Biden's presidency. According to Lipper data, funds that primarily invest in solar, wind and water around the world saw an inflow of $4 billion in the week to January 13th. And while the oil and gas sector has languished, renewables have flourished. The S&P Global Clean Power Index, which is tracked by the biggest clean energy funds, is up, wait for it, 145% in the past year. Since the beginning of January, it's managed an 8% rise. Some of this is down to a likely shift in US policy. President-elect Joe Biden has vowed to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord exited by President Donald Trump. He's also pledged to tie the US economic stimulus to tackling climate change. But will the sector live up to the hype? To find out, I'm now joined by Ross Gerber of Gerber Kawasaki. Ross, thanks for joining us. I'll talk about some of the concerns in a moment, but first, why is the sector so hot right now? Is it just down to the Joe Biden factor?
Well, no, it's not just the Joe Biden factor. It's also the factor of the fact that the need for dealing with climate change is just enormous, and the time is running out. So you have this combination of a lack of time, enormous costs to the global economy because of climate, whether it's fire or hurricanes or whatever. And so now with Biden coming in and the laser focus on handling and tackling this problem, it's just going to create a huge opportunity for these companies over the next decade.
But now that much of the sector is seeing sky-high valuations, do you think there's any risk going into 2021?
Well, of course. I mean, obviously, the sector clearly values this change in policy. And I think that with all good investments, oftentimes you have to pay more than you want to get in. But I think as a long-term investor, this is the sector you want to be in. You have to be in if you want to make above average returns. And we're heavily invested at my firm in clean energy and climate, what we call the climate change trade, because there's just, I think, a ton of money going to go into the sector. So although valuations are high and there's risk, the reward is also potentially high.
So how would you advise investors to get into the sector right now?
Well, for most investors, I think the easiest way to invest in sectors like climate is through an ETF. ETFs like TAN, which is really solar and renewable energy ETF, or LIT, which is lithium and battery technology, which gives you exposures there. And of course, pure plays like Tesla, which is just one of the few really pure plays on climate with solar and EV production. So there's many ways to play investing in the entire supply chain for solar and renewable energy, as well as EV cars. So, there's lots of opportunity in the sectors, but ETFs give you broad exposure, and I think it's a good way to do it.
Thank you so much. That was Ross Gerber of Gerber Kawasaki. Now, before we go, here are some of the hot stories from the sector. Canada is scrambling to salvage the controversial Keystone XL pipeline project after it became apparent that incoming President Joe Biden plans to cancel a permit for the $8 billion project on environmental grounds. The pipeline is intended to carry 830,000 barrels per day of Alberta crude to Nebraska. The provincial government said Monday it had a solid legal basis to seek damages if the project is cancelled by presidential fiat. French oil major Total announced it's paying $2.5 billion for a share in India's Adani Green Energy and its solar power assets. Total says it was its biggest investment yet in renewables as it joins other oil majors that have been under pressure to tackle climate change. And a group of Japanese companies, including Toshiba and Nissan, have called on the government to raise its 2030 renewable energy goal to 40 to 50% of its energy mix. Renewable energy accounts for only 18% of the current mix, and Japan is in the midst of a nationwide electricity shortage that saw wholesale prices surge to a record high earlier on Tuesday. In all, 92 Japanese companies from a wide range of industries signed up to the Japan Climate Initiative, saying Japan needed to be a global leader in decarbonisation. And that's your roundup of the renewable energy sector. I'm Elena Casas, and this is Reuters.